grade 12s and welcome to Learn Extra. I'm Lisa LaRue, and for the next hour and a half I'm going to help you guys prepare for your maths paper 1. Now remember guys, if you've got a question for us, you can phone us. The telephone number to dial is 086 1058 262. That's 086 1058 262. Remember, we'll only be taking questions from paper 1 for today. If you don't want to phone us, you can also email us, and the email address to use is helpdesk@learnextra.co.za, and remember, that's Learn Extra with an X. Alternatively, you can also go to Facebook, www.facebook.com/learnextra, and you can post your questions over there for us. Remember though, if you put a question on Facebook or if you email us, you need to give us your name and your telephone number so that we can get hold of you guys. Right, now remember, there's quite a lot going on Mindset today. After the math show, we will also be doing an hour and a half science show, followed by life science, and then math literacy. So there's a lot to look forward to today. Now, while we wait for you guys to phone through your questions, I'm going to start off the show by working through the KZN prelim for 2011. Now, I'm going to start right at the first question, and even though many of you might think, the first question is easy, it's just solve for x and simultaneous equations, I think it's very, very important that we make sure that we've got these basic skills down, because if you have a bad question 1, it could affect the way you write the whole rest of your paper. So let's have a look at our first question. Typically, the first question in a maths paper will be short questions involving solving for x and perhaps simplifying some algebra. The first question says, solve for x, correct to 2 decimal places where necessary. And the very first question is x, bracket x minus 2, equal to 8. Now, you might be jumping up and down and saying, no, that's an easy one. But let's just do it anyway. We have to warm up, and it is Saturday morning, so we'll take it slowly. Guys, very important, a common mistake that some people make is they say x is 8 and x minus 2 is 8. You cannot deal with it that way. What we need to do is we need to multiply out this bracket. So I'm going to distribute and bring everything through to the left-hand side. X multiplied by x gives me x squared. X multiplied by negative 2 gives me negative 2x. And then I'm going to bring my 8 over from the other side so that I've got a 0 on the right-hand side. And now I've got a trinomial which I'm going to attempt to factorize. I think this one will factorize quite easily. So that'll be x and x minus 4 and plus 2. And then let's just write down our answer. X is equal to 4, or x is equal to negative 2. Okay, easy first 3 marks, but then it's only right that we don't ask difficult questions right from the onset, because that could just freak you guys out a little bit. And the next question is also a trinomial, 3x squared minus 4x minus 12 equal to 0. Now, you could solve this by completing the square. Alternatively, I haven't actually checked whether it factorizes, but I don't think that it does. Let's have a look quickly. If I say 3x and x, and then let's think of my combinations of 12. It could be 12 and 1, 6 and 2, and 4 and 3. 4 and 3, no, that won't work. And 6 and 2, no. 2 and 6, no. I think we're going to have to use the quadratic formula. Remember, alternatively, you could also complete the square. I just find that we tend to make fewer mistakes if we use the quadratic formula. Remember, the formula is on your information sheet, so please don't copy it incorrectly. X is equal to negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac, everything divided by 2a. Remember that a is the coefficient of x squared, so a is 3, b is the coefficient of x, so that will be -4. And c is our constant value. Now, it's very important, if you want to get all the marks, guys, that you pay very careful attention to the actual instructions. The question said to how many decimal places now? I can't even remember. To 2 decimal places where appropriate. So you will lose a mark if you leave your answer in simplest surd form, so please don't. Okay, I'm going to substitute into my quadratic formula. Negative b is -4 plus or minus, then b squared, so that's -4 squared, I'm going to write that as 16, minus 4 times a, which is 3, and c, which is -12. Wait, that looks a bit untidy. Let's just fix that up. Everything divided by 2 times a, so that will be 6. Right, let's simplify this a little bit. This is going to be 4, positive 4, plus or minus. Now, inside my bracket, I get 16 plus 144. Minus 4 times 3 times 12 is 144. So 144 and 16, that gives me 160. So square root of 160 over 6. And at this point, I'm now going to take out my calculator. Right, so let's do this. Let me I just want to try and remember. Let's just keep, there we go. Right, so let's see. We've got a fraction, so I'm going to start off by putting on a fraction. And positive 4, and then plus the square root of 160 divided by 6. Oh my goodness, my calculator doesn't seem to recognize it. Let me try again. I'm going to say 4 plus square root 160 divided by 6 equal to. Okay, so the answer that I get is now in surd form. So I just need to change this and correct to 2 decimal places. That's going to give me 2,78 for my first answer. And then what you would do is you would just scroll back and change that plus to a minus to give the other bit of the answer. Right, so I'm going to leave that one at that. And let's move on to the next question. Now here we've got an inequality. And it says, consider the inequality, determine the solution to the inequality if x is an element of the real numbers and if x is an element of the integers. Now, I'm not going to worry too much about the real numbers and the integers bit for now. I'm going to focus my attention just on solving the inequality, and then I will interpret my answers afterwards. Okay, so what we need to do with any inequality is we first need to get it in standard factorized form, and fortunately it is given to me like that already. So I'm ready to rock and roll. I'm going to do my number line. Okay, now on my number line I need to indicate my critical values. Now critical values are values that make either one of these 2 brackets 0. So I'm going to write CV equals. I don't like to write x equals because then I'm afraid people might think that I didn't realize that it was an inequality. And -2. Right. So -2 and 3/4 are both going to go onto my number line. And both with -2 and 3/4, I'm going to have an open dot because it is less than but not equal to 0. So there's -2, and over here I've got 3/4. Okay guys, now there's many different ways in which you can now solve an inequality. It comes down to the same thing really in the end. What I like to do is I just like to test the different regions. So what I'm going to start doing is I'm going to pick a number that's easy and that lies between -2 and 3/4. And the easiest one for me would be to say, all right, it will have to be 0, I think, yes. So I'm going to say 4 times 0 minus 3 gives me a negative, and 0 plus 2 gives me a positive. And a negative multiplied by a positive is a negative. So negative, positive, positive over there. Okay, now I'm going to get on with the business of actually solving my equation or presenting the answer. Now for x an element of the real numbers, that's pretty straightforward. I'm going to say x element of, and the real numbers, that will be round bracket -2 to 3/4. So actually the first part is pretty straightforward. It gets a little bit more complicated now when I have to answer for the integers. Now the integers are numbers -1, 0, 1, 2, 3, but it doesn't include the fractions in between. So what I'm going to do now is I'm actually just going to write a list of the solutions. Now I cannot use -2 as one of my integers because, of course, my inequality does not include -2. So the first number that's an integer that lies between -2 and 3/4 is -1. And the next one is 0. And unfortunately, the next integer will be 1, and that will already be outside my range. So a very nice inequality, nothing too hard about the inequality itself, but just testing to see whether we know what the difference between an integer and a real number is. Right, let's have a look at the next question. Simultaneous equations, they always crop up somewhere or another. And guys, a simultaneous equation needn't be hard. It needn't be a problem. There's many different ways in which we can solve simultaneous equations. However, in this case where I've got an x and a y and then an x squared and a y squared, the easiest way, well actually I think the only way to solve this simultaneous equation is by substitution. What do I mean by substitution? What I'm going to do is I'm going to look at my two equations and I'm going to pick out the one that to me looks simplest. Now to me, definitely the first equation looks simplest. Then I'm going to isolate one of the variables, and it will be easier in this case to do it this way, to say -x is equal to minus 2y plus 3, and then of course x will be 2y minus 3. Okay, now in all likelihood, it's a good idea to keep in mind what you're doing here. This looks like the equation of a circle, and that's the equation of a straight line. So what are we really looking for? We are looking for where does the straight line and the circle intersect each other. So you might not necessarily be asked a simultaneous equation straightforward like this. It might be somewhere else in the graph section, but let's have a look. Right, so I've now said that x is equal to 2y minus 3. So in my more complicated equation, I am now going to replace all of the x's with 2y minus 3. So let's do that. Y squared minus 2 times 2y minus 3. And it's squared, so I'm going to write 2y minus 3 times 2y minus 3. Minus x, so that's minus 2y minus 3, equal to 1. Right, so now I've done my initial substitution. What I've managed to do is get my equation down to one variable only. Now I've just got to be careful that I multiply this out properly and that I don't make a mistake. And it's not just you guys that make mistakes with these things. I sometimes do too. So what I'm going to do is not try and do too many steps at once. I'm going to keep that negative 2 on the outside. And I'm just going to multiply out this bracket. 2y times 2y is 4y squared. Negative 3 times negative 3 is positive 9. Then my middle term is minus 6y and another minus 6y, so that's minus 12y. I'm going to multiply the minus into the bracket over here. It'll be minus 2y plus 3. And at the same time, I'm going to bring the 1 over from the other side. Quite a lot of work, these simultaneous equations, but they're not actually very difficult. So we need to work accurately and make sure that we bag those marks. So I'm going to have negative 8y squared plus 24y minus 18, and then minus 2y, and the 3 and the minus 1, let's just make that 2. Okay, I'm now getting to the point where I can add together my like terms. I'm going to have negative 7y squared plus 22y and my constant term, negative 16. Okay, now remember, guys, it's not necessarily a train smash if it doesn't factorize. You can always use the formula, although usually we would hope that with a simultaneous equation we wouldn't have to. I'm going to say 7y squared minus 22y plus 16 equal to 0. And now I'm going to attempt to factorize. Okay, so seeing as 7 is a prime number, 7y and y are really my only options. So now I'm going to have a look at my combinations for 16. What if I do 4 over here and 4? Will that work? No, it won't. Definitely not. I'm going to have to try something else. Perhaps 8 and 2. Let's see. 8 over here, 2 over there. Yes, absolutely, because that'll be a minus and a minus. So negative 8 times negative 2 is positive 16. And then I get 14 and 8, which will give me the negative 22. So that's great. Right, so we've got two solutions. Y is either equal to 8 over 7, or y is equal to 2. Now, guys, very often I find that we get so excited that we get an answer that we just move on to the next question. But remember, simultaneous equation means you've got to have answers for x and for y. So we're going to have to substitute these guys back. And it makes sense to substitute back into the simpler one of the two equations. So I'm going to substitute back into x is equal to 2y minus 3. Okay. X equals 2y minus 3, and x equals 2y minus 3. So substituting 8 over 7 in, so that's 2 times 8 over 7 minus 3. I'm not going to use a calculator for this. 16 over 7. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to put 3 over 7 as well. So then it will become 21 over 7. So 16 over 7 minus 21 over 7 gives me negative 5 over 7. That's my one solution. This one is a little bit easier. X is equal to 2 times 2 minus 3. So that is 1. So if you want to just tidy it up, you can maybe write your coordinates of intersection. 8 over 7 goes with negative 5 over 7. And, oh, wait a minute, guys. I'm actually now doing them the wrong way around because I was solving for y first. Oops. So it's actually negative 5 over 7 and 8 over 7, xy, and 1 and 2. So those will be the coordinates of the points of intersection between those two equations. Right, so we've got one more question left to do on question 1. Question 1 in this paper was 21 marks, guys. So that's quite a big portion of our 150 marks. So it really is worth our while to get question 1 right. Remember, you don't have to do it first. You can always do it later on, but it's advisable that you guys don't split up questions while you are working, because that just makes it difficult for the examiner. Right. This question says simplify completely without the use of a calculator. Now, I know that a lot of us do use our calculators a little bit just for the square roots, but I'm going to now properly do it without a calculator. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to split 72 up into its prime factors. 9 times 8 are the two that I always remember. And 9 is then 3 times 3. And 8 is 2 times 2 times 2. So that means that the square root of 72 is actually 6, because 3 outside of the square root, 2 outside of the square root, and then I'm left with a root 2. So it's actually 6 root 2. I think if you were to put that on your calculator and have your calculator do it for you, nobody would care too much, but just by showing your little factor ladder on the right-hand side, you're leaving absolutely no doubt in the examiner's mind. Okay, but I'm going to rub that out for now. And now I'm going to concern myself with this next bracket. I'm going to write them out. 3 minus root 2 and 3 minus root 2. Now, it can get quite tough to multiply out 3 brackets. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to first deal with the 2 pink brackets, hoping that they're going to somehow simplify my calculation later on. Remember, guys, if you are told not to use a calculator, please show all of your steps, because otherwise people are going to think that you cheated. So I'm going to say 3 times 3 gives me 9. Then negative root 2 times negative root 2 gives me positive 2. Now I'm going to deal with the middle term. Negative 3 root 2 minus another 3 root 2 is minus 6 root 2. And already I can see something interesting starting to happen over here. I'm going to say 11 plus 6 root 2 and 11 minus 6 root 2. Now what you guys should see is that this is a reverse difference of squares. So what I can just do is I can say 11 times 11 is 121. Please don't put it into your calculator just yet. Then minus 6 times 6 is 36, and root 2 times root 2 is 2. Okay, and then finally, that's 121 minus 72, which is equal to 49. Right, guys, that was the first 21 marks on the KZN paper 1. Lovely. That's already quite a couple of marks that you can bag. So, guys, please, if you're preparing, don't just ignore the question 1s. Don't only do question 1, but make sure that you can solve inequalities, simultaneous equations, that you know what you're doing, because also it just gives you that little bit of confidence if you know that you've got those 20 marks in the bag. Now, we're going to take a short ad break, but remember, the telephone number is 086 10 58 262 if you've got a particular question on paper 1 that you would like to ask me. Also, you can email us, helpdesk@learnextra.co.za. Remember to put your telephone number and your name on the email. And finally, you can contact us via Facebook, www.facebook.com/learnextra. Right, we're going to take a short break, and I'll be back with you guys shortly.